So, talking about John Locke. So, John Locke's theory of knowledge. Locke's whole system concerns knowledge. He opposes Descartes by saying that there are no innate ideas. I don't see. Are the Nigerians taking this class?
Yeah, they are.
I don't see them now. Do I necessarily need to see them? I don't care if I do. I mean, do they see me? I don't see. They're not on the screen.
Oh, I can see them.
Okay. So he opposes Descartes by saying that there are no innate ideas. We talked about Descartes and closing his eyes and saying everything starts from my mind. All knowledge comes from experience. So he's the empiricist. The source of our ideas is experience. Ideas for Locke are of the sensitive order. The mind, through reflection, compares ideas, but by that he does not mean in any way that we penetrate the interior nature of a thing. See, according to scholastic philosophy, the idea is an interior, spiritual, that is intellectual picture of the essence of a thing. So you achieve a knowledge of the essence of a thing. For Locke, it's simply a picture. It's an imaginative picture. It doesn't get beyond that. There is no intellectual knowledge. There's only sensitive knowledge. Are they there?
Henri is.
Henri, bonjour, Henri. So that's very important. So he compared our knowledge to looking at the great clock in Strasbourg. To look at the face is in no way to understand the interior workings of the clock. I know we did this, but I'm reviewing it. Those things which are immediately sensible by us are extension, solidity, shape, and movement. See, those are all of the sensitive order. See, an animal can notice those things. Crows know your faces. I don't know if you know that. They memorize your face, whether you're good or bad. So Father Fleece, for example, had the habit of shooting at crows because they're a nuisance. But they recognized him. And so it's something about those horrible birds. Did you ever notice that all nice things are sort of delicate, like nice flowers, and all the horrible things are like weeds and all, that they never die and they propagate themselves everywhere? You ever notice that? It's like the real beautiful birds are rare, and but then all the disgusting birds are everywhere. Must be the effect of original sin. So the other qualities such as color, taste, sound, etc. exist only in us and not in the exterior body. So we produce those. Color, taste, sound. We produce those. The exterior world for Locke is merely a collection of ideas or sensible qualities. Essences of things remain unknown. Locke is a nominalist, denying the objective reality of the universal. Remember, I talked about the universals, and you talk about that in logic, especially the logica major. We all have concepts, and they are all the same. Each one of us has the same concept. And that's why language is possible, and that's why meaning is possible, signification is possible. Otherwise, language would mean nothing. It'd be something the way dogs bark. They communicate emotions, that's all. The distinction among various species is reduced to nominal essences established by the mind. So you assign names to these common images that you have of things. They're just names. It's nominalist. Just names. We put labels on these things. And in no way refer to real essences. It is impossible to tell whether one thing is specifically, and specifically refers to essence, different from something else. For example, cat versus dog. You would have to be an idiot to not realize. Since the idea of the mind does not seize the interior essence. The idea of substance is merely a collection of simple ideas which is reduced to certain qualities which we always perceive to be united. See, substantia means something that can exist on its own versus accident, which must inhere in something else in order to exist, such as color. That's nothing for Locke. That's just, we call something a substance because we associate certain qualities, and it's all just associations. There's no metaphysical knowledge. It's essentially animal knowledge. Because a cat might know that, might have some sort of idea, we might say, or that you are an independent existing being, apart from, a smell or something like that. But it has no knowledge of it cannot distinguish between accident and substance. It knows that you're another species of animal, you're rather large, and you make strange noises, but you do come up with the food, right, which is the most important thing. So they don't care. Locke says that religion claims the immortality and spirituality of the soul, but he also affirms that these things cannot be proven by reason. So it's the divorce of reason from religion, which Luther already did. But so religion becomes an emotional, like Kierkegaard's, we're going to see him, leap of faith. It doesn't make any sense, but I believe. And that's very true in Protestant, especially generally, but the evangelicals and all. Is the belief has no basis in reason. You're going to take a course in apologetics, which is going to prove that it is reasonable to believe. In the Catholic faith, you must believe. You must make an act of faith. But the church insists that you see that it's reasonable to believe. And that's the what is known as the motives of credibility. Otherwise, what's the basis of your belief if you don't have motives of credibility? It's unreasonable, but that's the divorce between reason and faith, right there. So we really do not know whether the soul is material or not. God could even give to material things the power to think, which is intrinsically impossible. Locke has a contempt for the syllogism. Well, obviously, because I think he would be defeated by it. He says that it has very little importance in philosophical knowledge. And that would be true because he's only dealing in appearances. If you're not dealing in nature, then you can have no middle term in that syllogism that links the other two natures. You'll do that in logic, right? Logica minor. See, the spirituality of the soul is what contains the immortality of the soul. It's a direct deduction because it has no corruptive or corrosive principle. So therefore it is immortal. Right? Though that involves metaphysical thinking, in other words, essences, etc. Immortality and spirituality to somebody like that is meaningless. Yet they managed to write philosophy tracts, notice that, which involves a great deal of abstraction. So he prefers induction and the experimental method. So I see a lot of things that look similar, therefore it must be this. That's induction. The repudiation of the syllogism is consistent with his nominalism, since the syllogism becomes impossible once the universal is rejected. Because the universal is what connects. The universal of spirituality connects to immortality. So if you deny the universal, and also my syllogism is not your syllogism. If I am not using terms that you understand, I cannot make an argument with you that you would understand. It'd be like arguing with the dog. Ruff, ruff, ruff. See, and that's about all you're going to get back, if you even get that. There's no connection. See, the reason that you are understanding what I say is because you're connecting with all these ideas. The reason you're sitting in a course is so that I can help you to form the ideas of the course in your head. You're making concepts as I speak and as you're reading. That you're forming these concepts. So when somebody says John Locke and nominalism, oh, yeah, I know what that is. Yes?
What's the experimental method?
The scientific method of performing experiments, and that's okay for science, and seeing patterns, and then making hypotheses based on the patterns. But those hypotheses can change as time goes on. The COVID thing is a perfect example. I mean, back in the spring, it was, we're all going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. And the CDC, and the CDC just put out that you have a 99% chance of surviving it. But everything, shut down Europe, shut down the United States and Canada, shut down everything, mass, we're all gonna die. 99%. For younger people your age, it's practically nil. Practically nil. For you to die of it, you need some other problem, like an immune problem, or there was a young man that just died up in Boone, where we have our chalices done. He got it, and he had very athletic guy, 19 years old, and there's a college up there. And but they said, the doctors suspect that he had some nervous, some problem with his nervous system. It's always, whenever the young people die, it's always some other thing. And sure, that's going to, but the real cause is more than the COVID, because the COVID would not kill unless that disposition were there, weakness, whatever it is. But anyway, that's a perfect example. But you see, science would say, well, we're learning, and that's true. I mean, science changes constantly because it is learning. Very seldom will it come to something absolutely certain. I mean, that takes years and years and years for them to really decide this is certainly true. They constantly learn, so that's what you call experimental method. Yes?
And induction?
Induction is the same. In other words, you see a pattern, and you make a general principle from the pattern. Whereas deduction, it argues from essences. But all knowledge begins with experience. You have to understand that too. Otherwise, you'd be an idealist. But you discover essences from experience, and then you argue from the essences. See, but there's a principle in scholastic philosophy, nicel est in intellectu, quod non prius fuerit in sensu. Nothing is in the intellect which was not first in the sense. Your only source of knowledge is from your senses. But that is not to say that your knowledge is only of the sensitive order, because of the activity of the active intellect, which discovers the essence in sensitive data in your brain and prepares the concept for the passive intellect. You should have done that in psychology. I hope so. No. All right. So that's yes.
With the natural sciences, though, they seldom get, I've heard the term perfect induction. They seldom get that. They only generally get an imperfect induction.
Yes, yes. It's almost impossible to get perfect induction because that means you have examined every singular thing that pertains to the category. Every single bird on the whole planet. Okay? Good luck. All right? Locke's moral system. Locke does not develop a system of morality, but speaks about it occasionally, which is kind of nice, you know. From him, there is no moral order which is necessary, immutable, and essentially obligatory, obviously, and consistently, because it is impossible to assign objectivity to the notions of good and evil. In general, good and evil are the same thing as pleasure and pain. Morality boils down to seeking one's own personal interests, at the same time avoiding pain and achieving pleasure. What is morally good and bad depends directly on the opinion of men and is greatly influenced by customs, climate, laws, upbringing, and many other things. So there's no natural law. It's all what people think, or what the bird-brained boobs beyond the ballot box in the Supreme Court think. Locke's political ideas. In the political sphere, Locke held to the social contract theory among individuals of society from whom flow all the powers of government. The social contract is that the power resides in the people, the mass, the mob. And the mob makes a contract with its politicians the same way you would contract with a plumber or an electrician to do something for you. And they're hired essentially to operate the government. But the power remains with the people. That's the social contract. And he's the one that devised it. Rousseau is famous for it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he just got it from Locke. And that's very much, government by the consent of the governed. So the Gettysburg Address. Okay. That's the idea of the social contract. Government is from God, right, in the Catholic system. That people may elect, or the way in which officials are chosen doesn't matter in the Catholic system. It could be a hereditary monarchy, it could be an elective monarchy, the way the Holy Roman Empire was, all sorts of ways. It could be by popular vote, it could be by aristocratic vote, which was Venice, for example. That was a republic, but it was a very aristocratic republic. It doesn't matter. The church is totally indifferent to what form of government and how officials are chosen. But all authority comes from God, and those officials rule by the authority of God, not by the authority of the people. That is actually that idea that the people retained authority is condemned by Pope Pius X in Notre Charge Apostolique. That is, democracy, there's two senses of democracy. One is that the popular vote elects the officials. The church is indifferent to that. I mean, Catholic theologians and Aristotle think it stinks, all right, as a form of government. But the church is indifferent to that. It's Leo XIII. Right. But it is not indifferent to let's say, the philosophical notion of democracy, which is that power resides in the people. Now we'll do that in political philosophy, but I'll just do it quickly here. There's two notions that are compatible with the Catholic faith. And one is the translation theory, and that is primordially the power resides with the people, but when but the people give away their power to the rulers. That's the translation theory. That's St. Robert Bellarmine and the Jesuits in general. That's known as the translation theory. They do not retain the power. It's very important. They give it away, the political power, but it is primordially with the people. The designation theory, which is Dominican mostly, is that it pertains to the people to set up the type of government, basically a constitution, how the government will work, and to somehow select officials. It doesn't matter how they do it, but that the power comes from God. In other words, that there is no primordial power in the people to rule. There's only a primordial power to select a form of government and to elect officials in some way or the other. It could be a hereditary monarchy. Some way or the other. It doesn't, but that's up to them, the people in general. But and everyone agrees that that's the way the church operates. See, that even the Jesuits say, no, the church operates according to designation theory, and that is that the church only elects, but the power comes directly from God. The Dominicans are saying, even in political, natural political theory, that it's the same thing, that there's a designation and that the power comes from God. But in both cases, the power comes from God. And ultimately, political power is from God. This is democracy in its worst possible meaning. So John Locke is very much present in the modern world in that way. After World War I, democracy was just considered the peach pie of political theory. All the monarchies were done away with, and democracy, we have to keep the world safe for democracy. Wasn't that, was that World War II or World War I? Yes, that was World War I. Woodrow Wilson. The United States had to enter the war to keep the world safe for democracy. Yes.
And this is when we achieved the end of history, Your Excellency.
What's that? Oh, for the Jehovah's Witnesses? Was that?
No, it's Francis Fukuyama. He said that liberal democracy, we've achieved the end of history, so there's no more questions. Liberal democracy is the only...
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, thank you for telling me that. But it has been touted as this wonderful form of government, which all philosophers have considered to be really bad. So in any case, but it is obviously the only way in which leftism can succeed. But that's a little bit off the point. So the people always have the supreme power to change or dismiss the legislative body. It's John Locke. It's in the Declaration of Independence. When people decide that their government is oppressive, they can essentially rise up and revolt. That's revolutionism. It's condemned by the church. But it's held up as one of these. And that's precisely what the South invoked when it seceded from the North. That we think Washington is oppressive, and so this is it. And it is really what is operating the idea of Antifa and all of those other things is that this right-wing Trump administration is oppressive. We have the right to revolt against it. It's in the American spirit, which is inspired by John Locke. He prefers the temperate monarchy in which the three powers are separated and balanced. It's all from John Locke. This is the American system. That makes no sense whatsoever, the three powers balanced. The three powers are the legislative. We do all this in the other course. Executive and judicial. there was something in the Civil War, I think it was Abraham Lincoln took away the writ of habeas corpus, which means that you were able to judge someone in absentia. Habeas corpus means may you have a body, literally. In other words, the person must be in front of you to defend himself. But people were being judged in absentia. And the Supreme Court, said this isn't right. He said, well, let the Supreme Court execute it. In other words, I'm the executive power. They can do whatever they want. I don't care what they say. Whereas you have a three-headed monster, essentially. Well, that's another course. But anyway, the point is that John Locke heavily influences the American system. He believes in the absolute separation of church and state. The state should make laws without taking into account either the laws or the rights of the church. The state should establish liberty for all religions. It's hard to underestimate, or overestimate, I should say, the influence of John Locke on the modern world. Although Locke is a deist, does everyone know what a deist is? A deist is somebody that believes in a god, some supreme being, but which supreme being has nothing to do with our world. So he created the world and he left. I always say it's like your grandfather that moved to Florida. You send him a Christmas card, they have some sort of idea of worship of a supreme being, but he has nothing to do with providence. There's no influence of God in the world. And, it's like somebody who built a house and walked away. So he's a deist. George Washington was a deist. He nevertheless is intolerant toward atheists. This intolerance does not arise from piety, but merely from the recognition that without belief in God, it would be impossible to make oaths in good faith or to hold society together. So you need God as the glue of society and for everything to function. This is radical leftist thinking for the time. Critique of Locke. Locke is of major importance in the study of modern error, inasmuch as he lays all the foundations of modern-day materialism. Locke accentuated the fundamental theme of modern philosophy, which we owe to Descartes, namely the opposition of mind and matter. So putting up you blow up the bridge, it's either mind or matter, that those things fight in this system. In either idealism or empiricism, the two things fight. They do not fight in scholasticism. The object becomes subjectivized and the subject becomes objectivized. In other words, the object enters the subject and the subject conforms itself to the object. And there's a happy marriage. Right? Locke accentuated the fundamental theme of, For the moderns, these two things, mind and matter, are so opposed that it is impossible to construct a philosophy in which there would be no such opposition. So all of the philosophy after, let's say Descartes, Occam being more remote, but after Descartes, is going to be one or the other, mind or matter, empiricism or idealism. They are going to range themselves on one side or the other. Modern philosophy always sees the need to take a side either for mind or for matter, thus delineating the boundaries of the opposing camps of idealism and empiricism. Locke is the first systematic defender of modern materialistic empiricism, and his influence will be felt profoundly. The entire materialist school of thought, which dominates English thought and that of the entire Anglo-Saxon world, can find its origins in the doctrines of Locke. Everywhere where the British went, British Empire, they dropped off Locke, John Locke, with them. Furthermore, his popularity in France will deeply influence the Enlightenment thinkers, that's in quotation marks, of the 18th century, notably Voltaire and the encyclopedists, in such a way that we may assign Locke as one of the remote but direct causes of the French Revolution. All of those political theories, you know, the power to the people and all, that was all very, very prevalent in the French Revolution. Chopping off the head of the king, which the English did in 1649. What the French did in 1789, the English had done in 1649. You know which head came off?
You're referring to Charles I?
Charles I, yes. That was the English Civil War. And the person who was responsible for doing that was Oliver Cromwell, who was a Puritan. When I visited Ely Cathedral in England, did a tour, we went into this magnificent lady chapel next door to the cathedral. And all the windows were like these windows. You know, all, they were beautiful, Gothic windows, but all plain. And he said they were all originally magnificent stained glass windows, but the Puritans smashed all of them. And he said more damage was done to the cathedrals of England by the Puritans than by the Reformation. And he was not a Catholic. They went through all the churches, smashed everything, all the Anglican churches, because they thought the Anglicans were too Catholic. Yes. And they are the ones that came to Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay Colony, whose anniversary we celebrate this year, 1620, 400 years, is that right? 1620, they arrived in Massachusetts Bay Colony, Plymouth. They called it Plymouth because they left from Plymouth in England. And they called it Plymouth. It's there to this day. You want to go see it. There's some sort of reproduced settlement there, it looks like what it looked like in 1620. So that'll be, I don't know what day they arrived. So, but they did eat turkey, which was something I will be doing. So. So Locke's political theories will have an incalculable effect upon modern constitutions and modern political mentality. One can find echoes of Locke in the writings of Montesquieu and of Rousseau. Montesquieu, the division of the powers. Everyone says Montesquieu is the one that formulated that. In fact, it was Locke. He borrowed that from Locke. And Rousseau was an insane idiot. And a debauched, insane idiot, all of those three things. He took the whole idea of the social contract, which is given to him as, took it from Locke, all right? And Jefferson, who was a debauched atheist, also took all of his principles from John Locke. He said there should be a wall of separation between church and state. So, whose thoughts and writings will in turn dictate the political systems of the 19th and 20th centuries? So heavily will Locke influence American political thinking that it could almost be said that the real author of the Declaration of Independence and of the American Constitution is John Locke. Locke can also be credited, in quotation marks, with being the author of the problem of criteriology. Criteriology is another word for epistemology. A criterion means judgment. So criteriology is the study of how you know something. It's just another term for that science. Epistemology or criteriology. That is how we know things, how we have certitude of what we know. The history of modern philosophy is a history of answers to this very problem. It all concerns knowledge, how we know something. Because Locke is inconsistent on many points, his successors in philosophy will follow either his idealistic side or his skeptical side. His doctrine of association of ideas will give rise to Berkeley's idealism, and that's how you say it in England. Not Berkeley, but Berkeley. Okay, right? You should know. You live there. This in America, this is a clerk. In England, it's a clerk. If you speak a foreign language, don't ask questions about English pronunciation because you will never get a straight answer. Why that is Clark, no one knows, but that's what is said. Okay, so don't ask questions, and you'll be happy. If you start asking questions, you'll never figure it out. Just memorize it. So Berkeley's idealism, whereas his sensualist ideas will be perfected by David Hume. He will also influenced by his sensualism, Condillac and Comte, as well as Darwin and Büchner. But his other idealistic side lays the foundation for Immanuel Kant's system. So he had two, in one sense, he is a sensualist and empiricist. That will give rise to one school. On the other hand, because you're building up the bridge, you also have an idealistic side, because you have some ideas in your head. So that it's one or the other. It's an opposing thing. So how do you explain the ideas in your head? If you only know sensations. See, so those are the two problems to solve in philosophy, because there's no bridge. Bridge is blown up. So you'll see it. So it follows either empiricism or idealism. Locke is not a deep thinker. Many inconsistencies and antinomies, that means contradictions. Nomos in Greek means law, so antinomy, it means anti-law, or it essentially means contradictions. Of his system attest to this fact. Nonetheless, his influence is enormous, especially upon deists and materialists who will prepare the revolutions of the 18th century and ultimately give us the horror of what we call the modern world. Voltaire had nothing but praise for Locke and regarded him as his master. Voltaire was perhaps one of the most evil people that ever lived. I mean, if there was a devil incarnate, it was Voltaire. Yes.
Can we study about him?
No, both in this course and in the other, the Modern Eras 1. Yes, there's plenty to say about Voltaire. When he was dying, they sent a priest to him, and he just said, concerning Christ, "Oh, please don't speak to me about that man." That's what he said to the priest. He was the one that portrayed Saint Joan of Arc as like an impure woman in La Pucelle. He wrote a play, La Pucelle. But he was banned from France under Louis XV. And then when Louis XV died in 1774, he came back to France. And when Louis XVI found out about it, he said to his brother, the Comte not de Provence, the other one, who was later Charles X.
En d'Artois.
Comment?
Le comte d'Artois.
The Comte d'Artois, yeah. It was the Comte d'Artois and the Comte de Provence. The Comte de Provence was Louis XVIII, the Comte d'Artois was Charles X. They were two brothers. And Charles X, Comte d'Artois, later Charles X, was a Freemason. Right? And so Louis said to his brother, why is Voltaire back in France? Oh, well, just very popular, give him a chance, and he'll. And he stirred up everybody in Paris. There was even, it was sort of a gathering in one of the theaters of Paris of all of the aristocracy, where they had a bust of Voltaire, and they were praising Voltaire as a type of little god that had come to Paris and all. That's when there was really a lot of bad things happening in France. Louis XVI should have kicked him out of France again. He lived most of the time in Switzerland, but he was a very popular person. He wrote these. He was like he would write spicy stories about things, and things that you would read in low-grade newspapers, scandal stories and this, that, and the other thing. He was very popular, especially among the corrupt aristocracy. This aristocracy in France at the time was morally corrupt, especially in Paris. All right, so there was a lot. It was fashionable to exchange your wives among the aristocracy. You have my wife tonight, I have yours. It was fashionable. So, I mean, there was a great deal of corruption among the aristocracy. Anyway, that's Voltaire. And he had nothing but praise for Locke. So, number 4, the Deists. Deism in general. Deism is a movement which sought to free religious thought from authority. It held that there is a universal natural religion. Its principal tenet was believe in God and do your duty. Positive religion is bad because it has been corrupted by rulers and priests, meaning Catholicism and even Protestantism. All Christianity was attached in some way to the government before the 19th century. In Prussia was all Protestant, England Protestant, Sweden had an established Protestant religion, and the same was true of Catholic countries. The monarch was either
They have to turn off the microphones, but that's
okay. That's distracting to me though.
they have to turn off the microphones.
Yes. Okay. All right. Rulers and priests are bad. So original Christianity was pure natural religion, they say. The Deists either tacitly or expressly denied supernatural revelation. While they profess a belief in a personal God, usually, as the first cause of the universe, they hold that he has no longer any care or concern about what he created. The Deists were also known as free thinkers. So it was purely natural religion. You think what you want. There are no dogmas. It's just, as I said, God is your grandfather that moved to Florida. You sent him a Christmas card. You might actually fly down to see him once in a while. That's about it. That's how much religion is in your life. Mm-hmm. And so, the principal deists were Lord Herbert, Blount, Tyndall, Woolston, Bolingbroke, Collins, Morgan, and Chubb. Yes, Chubb. Whether he was chubby, I don't know. Henri, chubby means fat. All right? Notice they're all English. And they're all quite early, 1581 to 1648. And then in the 17th century, Blount, Tyndall, born mostly 17th century, Woolston, 17th century, Bolingbroke, 17th to 18th, Collins, 17th to 18th. They're all fairly early for these liberals and freethinkers. In France, they're almost all 18th century. There is some corruption in France already in the 1600s, but nothing like what it was in England. Bossuet had to fight against the what we commonly call unbelief. So he was Bossuet is practically the same dates as Louis XIV. Louis XIV is 1643 to 1715. Right, so he's practically at the same time as that. So the rise of deism can be traced to the growing interest in science. The work of Descartes and Newton in this field did much to promote deism. It was as if science were replacing religion and deism were responding to man's call for a scientific, reasonable religion in the place of revealed religions. Locke's philosophy, as well as that of Hobbes, we'll see him later, was a great influence on the Deists. Another indirect cause of deism was the disgust with the many dogmatic disputes in Protestantism. See, the more intellectual people would look at Protestantism and say, this is crazy. Everybody's squabbling about, what to believe. You can open the Bible and interpret it the way you want. That makes no sense. So Protestantism in that way failed in the people that had brains, let's put it that way. So they turned to deism. Lord Herbert has been called the father of deism since he set down the main principles of the doctrine. He pointed out the great common truths of all religions, but did not engage in polemics against supernatural revelation. Blount, on the other hand, did attack supernatural revelation and may be regarded as the author of modern biblical rationalism, which denies the supernatural character of virtually every miracle and prophecy in sacred scripture. The swamp business for the Red Sea. Blount says that the very notion of a mediator, namely Christ, is irreligious, and that most religious controversy has been instigated by rulers or ecclesiastics for their own self-interest. Shaftesbury, the patron of Locke, had little care for the letter of sacred scripture. He frees morality from revelation, holding that men have a capacity to apprehend worth in men and actions. He divorces morality from the future life, which is, very convenient. Thank you very much for doing that. So you can be an adulterer and everything else, but you don't have to work. You go ahead. He said that the root of religion is feeling and not accurate beliefs or meritorious good works. So it's religious feeling. It's seeing the beginnings of modernism. Toland was born of Irish Catholic parents, but he abandoned Catholicism and became a Presbyterian. He later fell into incredulity, that means unbelief. He didn't believe anything. He calls Christianity a superstition, which is proper to low-class and ignorant people, a type of monster. Thomas Aquinas, low-class and ignorant. It is the job, or St. Augustine, it is the job of intellectuals and statesmen to remove the monster's teeth and file down its claws. Toland was a materialist. He is also a monist. That means all things are one being. For him, God is the world from which all things proceed and to which all things return. There is no free will. The acts of the will are necessary and mechanical and are subject to the general laws of matter. Thought is a mere manifestation of the nervous system. So, computers can think and all of this. A computer can do whatever your brain can do, but cannot do what your intellect does.